Section 3 is going to be about our next kingdom, which is the fungi kingdom. As you can see from just this thing, we have a few different types of fungus out here, and they come in a variety of different shapes and sizes and colors. And they are actually a fairly pretty cool organism to look at. Some characteristics that have already gone over, if you remember, all fungi have cell walls. Cell walls, again, are going to surround your cell membrane and give your cell some shape, and therefore they're going to have a rigid structure to them. Unlike animals that have maybe a skin or something like you and I that is malleable and can move, we don't have cell walls because we need our skin to adjust to our movements and stuff. But fungi can have cell walls because they don't move around too much. They are going to be heterotrophs, however, they are not going to be heterotrophic like most other living things, such as animals. Fungus are going to consume things through absorption. So this is actually pretty unique. Their digestion actually happens outside of their organism. They don't have a digestive tract like we do. And they do reproduce through spores, which is also kind of unique. So let's look at some of the cell structure. We got fungus both come in unicellular and multicellular fungus. So keep that in mind. Mushrooms are clearly multicellular, while you get things like molds or yeast, which are both fungus that are unicellular. They do have what's called hyphae. Hyphae is how they are going to absorb that nutrients. And we are going to classify them based on the type of hyphae they have. So you got to actually sit there and look at it. And there are two types. We're going to have loose hyphae and tight hyphae. So it's either loosely arranged or tightly arranged, and it's going to be based off of looks. So if you're fuzzy, like mold that grows on an orange, this is what we consider a loose tangle of hyphae. So we do have a loose arrangement there. If you're solid, like this mushroom, then we have a solid looking shape and we have tight hyphae arrangement. So it depends on how these hyphae things are arranged, and we will get better images of what hyphae is coming up now. In order for your fungus to get food, because again, it is a heterotroph, it does not make its own food, does not go through photosynthesis like plants, it needs to grow into a food source and absorb that food. So it is a decomposer. So when things die or when they need recycled again, fungus come to the rescue and start growing into it. What it's going to do is it's going to land on its object in its spore state, and it's going to start growing these hyphae. They look a lot like roots, however they do not serve the same purpose as roots. They do serve a purpose of anchoring them like holdfasts did in kelp and like roots do in some trees, but again they are not going to take up water. That's not their main goal. What these hyphae are going to do is they're actually going to secrete chemicals into whatever it is decomposing. Those chemicals are going to decompose and digest it and break it down into smaller, simple chemicals, and then the hyphae is actually going to reuptake them into the fungus as well. So it is working both ways here. We secrete chemicals, break things down, and then come back up. Again, some of these are going to be parasitic. You can think of athlete's foot or even ringworm if you've ever had either of those. Those are a fungus that grows on your skin. The hyphae kind of grows into the organism, secretes chemicals to break it down, and then reuptakes once those chemicals are broken down. So we do call that getting food by absorption. Reproduction, fungus can reproduce in a variety of ways. All fungus are going to reproduce by sporing, though. Spores are not seeds, but they are going to be kind of similar. Spores are lightweight and they do have a protective coating on them. They need to be lightweight because they take air currents into consideration on how they transport it. If I am a fungus and I want to reproduce, I do not want my offspring growing right next to me taking the same food source that I'm in, so I want to find some way to get them away from me and reproduce somewhere else. So spores are going to come from those fruiting bodies. The fruiting bodies you're probably most familiar with are like the mushroom heads that you actually eat. Again, you don't go digging up the underground hyphae and eat that really. You kind of just take the fruiting bodies and that's what you consume after it's already digested all that and reuptaked it in. So these fruiting bodies contain spores, and as our little image here, you can see these spores are these little particles that are floating in the air. And hopefully that at least some of them are going to land in favorable conditions to start growing. So again, if I throw out 1,000,000 of them and only 100 of them survive, that's pretty good. Um, we do have different types of reproduction as well, depending on what kind of fungus you are. A lot of fungus go through asexual reproduction. Again, asexual like in bacteria, they are going to be genetic copies. We are not mixing our genetic material with another organism, so therefore we only have one set of genetic material to work with, and we're only going to make offspring that are genetically identical to us. We can do this through sporing. So again, we can just kind of shoot a whole bunch of spores out containing our genetic material and hoping that it lands somewhere. Or in some cases, such as yeast, we can do it through budding. Budding is pretty much just growing another organism off one side of you until it's fully grown and developed and then pops off and becomes another organism. So you can look at our diagram here for a budding process. Other organisms do this as well, such as starfish. That's one way starfish can reproduce. But this is yeast, and yeast is a fungus. Our next is sexual reproduction. Fungus can go through sexual reproduction. In this case, two fungus that are growing next to each other, their hyphae can actually grow into each other and kind of become one organism after that happens. But this one organism does have a different genetic makeup because we had two genetic codes in play. So when this hyphae kind of grows into each other, we can make spores that are going to be genetically different from us. And once we do actually connect, we are going to start sharing our DNA, and therefore we will be a genetically different organism from either one of the parent organisms that actually happened. In fact, the largest living organism on Earth is actually a sexually reproducing fungus. It's a cave fungus found somewhere in a deep, dark cave, but all of its hyphae is connected underground. And that's something that you don't normally see when you go looking at mushrooms. You will see that mushrooms kind of grow in little packs. So you do see like this area that has a whole bunch of mushrooms. I'll show you over here. You'll see that these mushrooms kind of grew all next to each other. This is one organism. It just has multiple fruiting bodies. Over here we do have one organism. It has multiple fruiting bodies. It's just connected through its hyphae underneath, and you can't see that because it's under the soil or buried in the organism that it is decomposing.